Senator, I appreciate your sentiment and your concern, but it's not within the remit of the Inspector General.
But it's law, right? I mean, I think in general, and I would hope this would be a bipartisan thing, that the idea that our intelligence community, of which I was a proud member, would be turned against American citizens because of their alleged political views is as fundamental to who we are as anything that I've seen come before this committee. And I want you to say, separate from what your remit would be, I want you to say publicly that we're not going to turn agencies like the CIA and the NSA and all these things against the American people. And you are the last line of defense. You are an IG, quite literally, overseeing conduct of the department. So if the intelligence agencies were asked to surveil American citizens, what would you do? Would you open an investigation at a minimum? Would you push back at all?
This may look like a routine confirmation hearing, but it's actually a stress test of constitutional limits. What's really being tested here is whether oversight roles exist to protect citizens or to shield institutions from accountability. This raises broader questions about how power is restrained when legal authority and political pressure collide. In this video, we'll break down how a single exchange exposes the fragile line between national security and individual liberty.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. Mr. I'm sorry, Moring, Platte. Sorry, I know your first name. Mr. Moore, thank you. Can you tell me, as the Department of Defense Inspector General, the position you're nominated for, you know, you just went through that you'd uphold the U.S. Constitution, you would swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, right? Correct?
Yes, Senator.
And to uphold the laws of the United States. You're a lawyer, but IGs don't have to be lawyers, but both as an IG, but as a personal, as a lawyer, uphold the laws of the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So I'm concerned about, in September, the president issued an executive order tasking the Department of Justice to come up with a list of domestic terrorist organizations. He gave a very broad definition of what domestic terrorist organizations were, including descriptors like anti-Christian, different views on the family, religion, and morality. There's also reports that the Department of Defense is participating in an interagency weaponization working group made up of people from Department of Defense, from the CIA, Department of Justice, FBI, IRS, to go after the president's adversaries or enemies. As the Inspector General, you would be expected to, flag issues of law and investigate, deeply problematic issues. If a Department of Defense intelligence agency, like the NSA, DIA, the service intelligence agencies, Army Intel, were to target American citizens for their political views and collect on American citizens, is that in violation of the law?
Senator, my answer
just press
to
your mic if you could. And maybe it's just over here. I can't.
It's lit.
It's on. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Senator, the answer to the question has to do with the role of the Inspector General. I believe that the General Counsel at the department would be better able to address your question.
But this is just about law. I mean, I understand that the IG isn't the one making those legal announcements. But if you learned that intelligence agencies were wiretapping American citizens because of their political views, is that in violation of U.S. law?
The Department IG only conducts oversight with regard to the department. And if your question is limited to the department, it's possible that the Inspector General may have a role in determining whether or not those agencies followed their own policies.
But this is an issue of law. I mean, imagine, so let's say the National Security Agency, which does wiretaps, SIGINT, and I'm a former CIA officer, work with them all the time. Let's say the President of the United States tasked them to wiretap people who were attending the No Kings rally in Detroit, Michigan. Would that be legal for the intelligence community, the DOD intelligence community, to target American citizens for their political views?
Senator, I appreciate your sentiment and your concern, but it's not within the remit of the Inspector General.
But it's law, right? I mean, I think in general, and I would hope this would be a bipartisan thing, that the idea that our intelligence community, of which I was a proud member, would be turned against American citizens because of their alleged political views is as fundamental to who we are as anything that I've seen come before this committee. And I want you to say, separate from what your remit would be, I want you to say publicly that we're not going to turn agencies like the CIA and the NSA and all these things against the American people. And you are the last line of defense. You are an IG, quite literally, overseeing conduct of the department. So if the intelligence agencies were asked to surveil American citizens, what would you do? Would you open an investigation at a minimum? Would you push back at all? Or is it just okay now? And God forbid, right? God forbid that this is just kind of the way we're going to be. The president says these are domestic terrorist organizations, and so we're now surveilling American citizens because of their views. I would hope my Republican colleagues would find that just as repugnant as me. I want to hear you say that you know that that is against not only the law, but our values.
Senator, I really appreciate your concern, and my sentiments are with you, but it's not my role to have personal opinions. I'm guided by the facts and the application of the law to the facts.
Well, I would just say it shouldn't be about your role. It should be about who we are as American citizens and what we do with our government when we turn it against people. And I yield back.
You know, I'm perfectly willing to answer the question. You're exactly right. You shouldn't be targeted for your religious beliefs, but it's a little easier for me. I'm my own agent. I can say what I want. I was elected and have it. They are going to be working for people, and it's a little harder for them to have a philosophical discussion with you. But I will tell you that your questions are hypothetical ones, but there is a real question. It was called Arctic frost, and it was administered by the Biden administration, where 9 members of Congress were targeted with unconstitutional warrants. They were given subpoenas for their geolocation. According to the Carpenter case that was decided by the Supreme Court, your geolocation, you do have a ownership or a privacy interest in that, and they were illegally surveilled, 9 members of Congress. And if we're looking for bipartisan criticism of surveillance run amok, that's a place we might want to start.
The moment unfolded quietly, but the implications echoed loudly through the room. Senator Elissa Slotkin leaned forward and asked a question that stripped away hypotheticals and exposed a raw constitutional nerve. If the Department of Defense, through its intelligence arms, were ever to target Americans solely for their political views, to monitor, collect, or surveil them because of what they believe, would that be legal under United States law? It was a direct question grounded in the oath just sworn moments earlier. An oath to the Constitution, an oath to the law. And yet, the answer never truly came. Instead, what followed was hesitation, deflection, a careful retreat into procedural language about remit, jurisdiction, and roles. Again and again, the nominee for Inspector General declined to state plainly what the Constitution itself makes clear: that the power of the intelligence community, immense and largely unseen, is not meant to be turned inward against the people it exists to protect. The exchange grew more tense, not because of raised voices, but because of what remained unsaid. This was not a theoretical debate. Slotkin pointed to executive authority, to expansive definitions, to interagency coordination that blurs lines between oversight and enforcement. She pressed on history, on precedent, on the simple but essential truth that political belief, religious conviction, and moral perspective are not crimes. They are protected freedoms. And when government actors hesitate to affirm that principle, it raises a question far larger than any single nomination. At its core, this moment revealed the fragile balance at the heart of American power. Intelligence agencies operate in secrecy by necessity, but democracy operates in trust. That trust is built on limits, limits written into law, limits enforced by oversight, limits defended by people willing to say no when authority drifts too far. The Inspector General exists for that reason, to stand apart from politics, from pressure, from convenience, and to safeguard legality when others may look away. Yet here, in this hearing room, when asked whether targeting Americans for their views would violate the law, the answer dissolved into abstraction. Not my role, not my opinion, guided only by facts and process. Those words may sound responsible, even cautious. But history teaches us that caution without clarity can become permission. Silence can become complicity. Slotkin's frustration was not partisan, it was constitutional. She spoke as a former intelligence professional herself, someone who understands both the necessity and the danger of unchecked surveillance. Her warning was not about today alone or about one administration or one political party. It was about the precedent set when extraordinary tools meet vague justification. Once normalized, such power rarely shrinks. It expands, quietly, incrementally, until one day the unthinkable feels routine. This exchange exposed a deeper truth about modern governance. Laws are only as strong as the people willing to defend them. Oversight is not a box to check. It is an active responsibility. And values are not abstract ideals. They are tested precisely when fear, pressure, or politics demand shortcuts. The nominee spoke of facts and application of law. But law without interpretation is hollow. Facts without moral grounding are dangerous. The Constitution is not self-enforcing. It relies on individuals placed in positions of trust to understand not just what is allowed, but what must never be allowed. What happens when officials refuse to draw that line publicly? What message does it send to agencies listening carefully behind closed doors? When leaders avoid affirming limits, power does not pause. It listens, it learns, and it adjusts. This is how democracies erode. Not through dramatic collapse, but through careful language, procedural retreat, and unanswered questions. The framers understood this. That is why they embedded checks, balances, and independent oversight into the system. Not to slow justice, but to prevent its distortion. In that hearing room, the question was simple, but the stakes were enormous. Can the government target its own citizens for what they believe? The Constitution's answer is clear. The hesitation was not. Moments like this matter because they reveal character under pressure. They show whether those entrusted with power see themselves as guardians of principle or managers of process. They remind us that freedom is not lost all at once, but negotiated away in moments of uncertainty. The American system depends on vigilance, not just from lawmakers, but from the public. Oversight does not end when the gavel falls. It continues with attention, accountability, and the refusal to accept ambiguity where clarity is required. This was more than a hearing. It was a warning. And it is up to all of us to decide whether we listen. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe constitutional limits must be defended, not deferred, stay informed, stay engaged, and subscribe to Liberty Report USA.